Please welcome the happiness lady, Glendora. Hi, Glendora. How are you? Pleasure to see you. You're known as the happiness lady, well, is that what they say?
No.
What do they call you?
Glendora.
Yeah.
And what did you say your name was?
I'm Dave. It'll be my last night.
You are a very good interviewer.
Well, thank you.
And I'm going to recommend you for a raise.
Thank you.
The recipe for happiness, David, is that there's one thing in this world that you can do better than anybody else. And if you will go by yourself, you will find out what that is. And you will do it, and you'll be happy. Now, if you don't do it, David, it's going to nag at you every second of your life.
So you find out what it is that you're good at.
No, the one thing that you can do better than anybody else.
The one thing you can do better than anyone else, and you just concentrate on that.
Yes, you do.
And then that'll make you happy.
Well, sure, because you'll get everything you want.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't tell you we have to back up to 97 Ohio Street, Wilkie, 1940.
Wilkie, 1940.
My father had a sore on his tongue, and it wouldn't heal. And it was cancer. And they couldn't do anything about it in Bangor. So they sent him to Massachusetts General. And they tried radium. That's what they used in those days. And they couldn't make it go away. Well, on 14th Street, they sent him to Boston again. And they couldn't cure it. We're back to 1941. No, we aren't. No, we aren't.
We are?
Where are we?
Where are we?
7th grade, 8th grade. Okay, we're going into 8th grade in that winter. And when you're in 8th grade, how old are you? 13?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Bangor had built 2 brand new junior high schools. 7th, 8th, and 9th grades. One was Garland Street on that other side of Bangor that I know nothing about. And one was 5th Street Junior High.
I can't get the speed right. I'm going to have to tell this to you live.
Of 1940. I entered a brand new junior high school. It was really classy. The gymnasium and auditorium.
Well, folks, this is hopeless. Sometimes this recorder works, sometimes it doesn't.
Classes. Miss Burns taught Latin.
So I'll have to do it live. Bye, recorder. Thank you anyway. I'm sorry you're sick. So what year was it? We said it was? It was the fall of 1941. We said I was 13 years old and I was in 8th grade. And it was a brand new junior high school, as I said. Bangor, Maine is a very progressive city, very sophisticated city. They had 2 junior highs that they built that year. One was Garland Street over on the other side of the city, and I know nothing about that side of the city. I never lived there. I never knew it. And the other one was at 5th Street Junior High. Miss Burns taught us Latin. That was the first year of Latin. Trefethen taught algebra, and Trefethen had some kind of a raise on his shoe, some kind of a injury to his leg and his foot. And he had red hair and very sparse red hair, and when he got angry, he would throw chalk at the board. Guess where he would be today? And I had Miss Peavy for social studies. That would be history and whatever social studies are. And what else? Spanish, I guess. I guess that's where I started learning Spanish. And it was a beautiful new school. It had gymnasium, it had a big auditorium. The gymnasium was at this end and the auditorium was at that end. And we had a newspaper. These are all things that we didn't have back in the old-fashioned schools. And so that was 8th grade. And then came 9th grade. And what year was that? That would be the fall of I don't know. Let's see, in 9th grade, you're how old? Hold it just a minute. Yes, it would be 14, right? In 9th grade. That would be 1928 to 1938. That's 10, and then 4 more years would be 42. All right, so in 41, I'm in 9th grade at Bangor, 5th Street Junior High School. We, of course, all walked to school. There was no such thing as busing. No matter how far away you lived, you walked to school. There, we never had a lunch hour the way we did in the old-fashioned schools. We didn't have a lunch hour. We stayed in school all day, and we had a cafeteria. And that was something new and exciting to me and very modern. And I told you the fall of 41. And junior high school was quite an experience. We rotated classes. We had several teachers. And I told you we had activities that I'd never had before, like basketball teams and things like that. And all the time this war is raging in Europe. And I told you about how Pearl Harbor came on December 7th, and how all of our youth were disappearing. There weren't many people left. And we moved from 14th Street, where it was so cold, to 97 Ohio Street. Did I tell you that they had trolley cars in Bangor? It was nice. You get a different color pass every week, and I think it cost $1. And you could go all over the city in the pass, with the pass, go to the end of the line, and then the wires would go from here to that way, and then they could go this way. And then they go to the end of the line, and they put the wires up over the top, and then they could go that way. And I told you about the Bob Hope interest and about listening to the radio. And then in 9th grade was over. Oh, by the way, we had civics. And in civics we learned that there was a justice system, and that there were courts, and that there were judges, and that there was justice, and that people followed the laws and they followed the Constitution. Okay. Well, from 1991 to 2009, I found out that that was a lie. No, the textbooks were not lying, but the courts were, and they weren't any of those things that they should have been. And about my father and cancer, they told my father, who was about 51 then, that it was terminal and that they wanted to try what they called a radical. There was a sore on his tongue that wouldn't heal, and they wanted to remove 1/3 of the tongue on the right side and all of the glands from here all the way down to here. Who did this? Harvard Medical School. They got very interested in my father's case, and they believed they had a chance if they went after the cancer with surgery. And so what choice did my father have? So he took it and let them do the surgery. And he was in Massachusetts General, and then they put him in Huntington Memorial Hospital on Huntington Avenue in Boston. And they did that. And they kept him there for quite a while. Then they told him he could go home for a week, but to come back the next week. And then they told him he could go home again, and he would come back in a month. And then they told him he could come home and come back in 3 months. And then he could go home and come back in 6 months, 9 months, and then a year. And then they told him, you can come back next year, second year. You can come back the third year. You don't have to come back until the fourth year. 5th year he went back. They pronounced him cured. They actually cured it with surgery, cancer in the tongue, and all of these glands going down the... Well, did it bother him with talking? No, it didn't, because he was a barber. And you know, barbers have to talk. So it never bothered him, and he learned to talk again. Brave man. He had been through that depression, trying to bring up 4 children. Couldn't find a job, couldn't find work anywhere. Brave, brave man. What bleak, 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 dark moments he faced for years and years and years. Ralph Arnold Folsom Jr., Sr., Ralph Arnold Folsom Sr. Well, the defense factories in Massachusetts were going at a very rapid pace. He saw the opportunity to make a living. So he went to Worcester, Massachusetts. Then he went to Springfield, Massachusetts, and he got a job at the U.S. Royal, which later became Uni Royal. And he got a job at Bosch Magneto, and he was working 2 jobs. And then he was barbering. He was working 3 jobs. He was so happy to have the opportunity to work and make a living and buy things and have some kind of a good standard of living, that he just worked. And so my mother and I started Bangor High School as a freshman along about 1942, and the war was raging. And my mother and I, she broke up housekeeping in Bangor, sold all her things, and went to Springfield, Massachusetts with me. Ralph was in the Air Corps, Gordon was in the Marines, and Helene was teaching school in Aroostook County, Maine. So there was just I, the youngest, and we went to Springfield, Massachusetts, and it was so different. They had rows of tenements. To this day, I can't stand to look at tenements. And it was like cliff dwelling. And I could never tolerate living in such a place, and I couldn't today. And anyway, my mother's friend there was Helen Gibson, and the friendship went way, way, way back. Way, way, way back to like 1920, maybe earlier. And my father was a guard at the Springfield Armory. What was the Springfield Armory? Manufacturing of weapons to kill people. And of course that was booming. But anyway, 20, 30 years later, here's my mother back in Springfield, and her son, Ellsworth Gibson, said that Glendora should go to classical high school because that was the best high school in Springfield. They had a very advanced education system in Springfield, Massachusetts. Trade school was for people who were going to go into the trades, carpentry and masonry, and commerce was for people who were going to be secretaries, mostly females. And then technical was for people who were going into the scientific world. And classical was exactly what it said. The people who were going to go into the arts, the people who were going to go into literature, people who were going to go into ancient history. Classical high school, which had such a high standard that Smith College and Mount Holyoke College and Yale and Harvard, all the Ivy League, would take people, graduates of classical, without an exam because they knew they were good. So Ellsworth says that's where my mother should go. So my poor mother in January of 43? I think so. Yes. Took me to stuffy, overbearing Dr. William C. Hill, who had been awarded an honorary doctorate by Smith College for his educational accomplishments, meaning his students. And she took me there. And my mother was a very impressive person. She was extremely good looking and very well dressed and well spoken, superb diction, elocution. And nobody could help but be impressed by her. And even stuffy Dr. Hill could see that. And even though he looked down on Maine education, because this, after all, was Massachusetts. And here was somebody from down Maine. And so my mother talked him into letting me enroll there, but he sent me back a year. Yes, he sent me back a year. Robina Anthony was a terrorist, a woman of very little ability, and she taught English. And at classical high school, English marked you. If you passed 10th grade English, then you got into 11th grade. If you passed 11th grade English, you got into 12th grade. But English was severely severely dominated the academic curriculum. And if you got a D in English, you had to do it over again. You didn't have to fail, just if you got a D. So Robina Anthony saw to it that I got a D. And so I had to do it over again, and that meant I had to do 10th grade over again. Well, what do you think of that? And they just filled in other courses, filler courses like art. And I guess I was allowed to take Latin. Or did they stop me from Latin because they didn't think Maine Latin was good enough for Massachusetts? But I was bewildered by the whole thing. And but the main personality and the main perseverance and the main likability and the main appeal prevailed, and I began to make friends. And my first boyfriend was Robert Healy. Oh, he was my second boyfriend. I don't know which number he was. And he had a job. He worked at Forbes & Wallace department store, and he made money. I never heard of that. And that summer, I believe my mother shipped me up to Presque, Maine, where my sister was. And she had married a farmer, a potato farmer, James Roger Erskine. And I believe that's the summer. No, maybe it was the next summer. And I was up there on the farm, 75 acres. And I'm not a farm person because there's too much cruelty to animals. Even though this was a potato farm, it was on the edge, the cruelty. And when I came back in the fall, where are we now? The fall of 42? 3? Okay, the fall of 43. I started out 10th grade. Again. You want to know something? At Fancy, by the way, the richest people in Springfield sent their children to classical high school. And their contemporaries were sent to boarding schools like Mount Herman and Phillips Academy, places like that. All money schools. And I had an English teacher named Edwin E. Smith. He was from White River Junction, Vermont. He was a graduate of Dartmouth College, New Hampshire, often called the Country Club of New England. And I think he had some courses at Harvard, but he was the English teacher. So we ran out of electricity. You know where I was? Yes, I was telling you about Edwin Smith. And that man was very, very popular with the students. And no wonder, he liked people. He liked students. And he had an effect that was good upon the students. And I began to like him very, very much. And he had an interest in me. And he was out to help me. And I turned from a C student, no care, just got by on what was given me, and I became very interested academically, and it was a great change. And I went from a C student to a B student. That was in 10th grade. In 11th grade, two great things for my age. He was my homeroom teacher, and then he was my 11th grade teacher. No more Robina Anthony. He was just the antithesis of Robina Anthony. Whereas Robina Anthony did everything negative to you, Edwin Smith did everything positive to you. Edwin Smith's wife was Florence Quilty Smith, and she taught Spanish. And I squeaked by with Spanish with her, and that was the end of the Spanish. No, it wasn't. No. In high school it was. And so now we're up to the year 1945, 44, 45. And I would be what? Born 1928, 8 from 14 is 6. So I'd be 16. And very impressionable, and I met Wayne Bellinger. And Wayne Bellinger was a comic, and Glendora was a comic. And we used to go out and do shows together. And Wayne would really make me laugh and laugh and laugh. And we called ourselves Sweetie and Sweetiette. And we became very popular and very much in demand at parties. I went to Hope Congregational Church with Wayne and Mary Frances Miller and Eleanor Anderson. And that was Congregational Church. Of course, the Pilgrim Church in New England dominated it, you know, the white churches, the white steeples, the red carpets, you know, the Congregational Church. That was the Pilgrim Church, the Puritan Church. Franklin was a Congregationalist. And we began to be asked to do shows at parties and tell jokes and do things. So we became the comics of the 11th grade, and very, very popular, and a lot of laughing. Gloria Pasquini, Eleanor Rollins, and Royal Southworth. So we had a little gang. I remember Doris Fournier. And Classical High School was a very, very old building. although it had half of it was new, and an extension had been built on it, Classical Junior High School. As I say, Springfield was in the forefront as far as public education went. They had a very active school board, and they had the 633 plan, which was 6 years of elementary school, 3 years of junior high, and 3 years of senior high. And as I say again, all of the people who graduated from Classical High School were college prep ready. And how? If you wrote a theme paper in Classical High School and you did a run-on sentence, no matter how good your paper was, no matter how hard you worked on it, if you had one run-on sentence, E. If you had one incomplete sentence, E. So my English skills were really sharpened and perfected by Edwin E. Smith. And I told such good jokes in 11th grade that I became class president in the 12th grade. Crawford Lincoln, who had a wry sense of humor, thought it would be funny and a blow to stuffy Dr. Hill if Glendora became the class president, the senior class, which would be the class of 46. Well, it sort of backfired. They didn't expect it would happen, but it did happen. Glendora was very popular with the jokes, and the election was won by a plurality of 60%. It was a popular vote through and through. And so Dr. Hill was aghast. He was astounded. Why could such an accursed thing happen to Classical High School? Fortunately, that was Dr. Hill's last year. The spring of '45, Dr. Hill retired. Classical lost its personality of being Dr. Hill. And he called me to his office and cautioned me of the great responsibility that I had and the importance of keeping the Classical High School image, even though to him it had been devastated. And so I went to work for summer resorts, and what a ball that was, waiting on table at very rich summer resorts. Then we thought it was something that they paid $25 a day. Well, it was something then. It's terrible now what they pay. If I paid to stay in a hotel today at the prices they charge today, I wouldn't be able to sleep all night thinking of how much it cost. But anyway, these were very classical, very rich and high-financed summer resorts. Protect the animals. So my grades really began to be cum laude, with praise, cum laude, which Wayne and I called cum lousy. And a name began to appear on the honor roll. And the honor roll was read in the assembly hall. And when the name Glendora Folsom was read, all of my little classmates went, oh, because I was such a nice kid, and here I was on the honor roll. So Crawford and I went to work at New Eggan Inn in Boothbay Harbor. You know Boothbay Harbor on the coast of Maine. It's south of Bar Harbor. And I think a couple of our other classmates. Crawford came from a rather wealthy family in Longmeadow. He wanted to see how the other half lived. Of course, Crawford was, on his way to Yale. There was no question about that. And I was selected by Edmund E. Smith to take special English because all of the grammar, the composition, the literature, Shakespeare and all that had been learned and got A's. Edmund used to read my papers because he'd read them in the class. When he'd pass out the papers, return them, he'd keep one back, and it was Glendora's, and he would read it because it had jokes in it. And that entertained the children. So special English, what was that? Special English for kids 17 years old, reading a book a week. Wow! Reading a book a week! You can see how demanding classical high school was. Plus being the senior class president, about which I knew nothing. Robert's Rules of Order, I knew nothing. Well, it was a new kind of fame and a new kind of attention and a new kind of applause. And anyway, Edwin Smith said I could take special English. And I did it. I read my book a week and I wrote my paper every week. Crawford, who was much smarter than I was, and who came from a much more academic family than I ever did, never got his papers done. He was always behind. So I got A's in special English, and I think I got A's in everything else. I think Latin got to me when we started doing Caesar's Wars, and I didn't know what that was about. I mean, the grammar and all I could do was the first declension. You know, the first declension was Agricola, what is it? Agricola, Agricolar, Agricolum, and Agricola. And all I could do was Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, Coca-Colum, Coca-Cola. And we had Miss White for European history, and she was a graduate of Radcliffe. And we had on the board, in every classroom, on the chalkboard was, nobody has the right to do that which if everybody did it would destroy society. Immanuel Kant, the philosopher. Nobody has the right to do that which if everybody did it would destroy society. And underneath it was said Immanuel Kant, K-A-N-T. And so one student put underneath that, well, if Immanuel can, I can't either. So Miss Chatto came in as the principal of Classical High School, quite a different personality from Dr. Hill. And the face of Classical High School changed. But I was a class president, and I had to have meetings, and I had to do everything, but all the other kids cued me and acted as an idiot sheet for me so I could just read it. And I ended up, I believe, magna cum laude. Summa cum laude, of course, would be just about all A's, and magna cum laude would be A's and B's. And I ended up far ahead of the children in the other high schools. And most of the freshmen and sophomores in college. The training had been that rigorous. I had Glendora's diary, which was very popular. It had jokes in it, and it told about what Sweetie and Sweetie Heart were doing, and it made people laugh, and various people would ask if they could read it, and then give it, and somebody else asked if they could read it, and Edwin Smith wrote a prologue to the third or fourth one, Glendora's diary. Only I misspelled it. It was Glendora's dairy. And so that was a class of 46. And I believe I received 240